Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome all to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam. We started Canto 6 yesterday, Divine Protection, and now we're going to begin Chapter 1. Mukam Karoti Vachalam, Pangum Langhate Girim, Yak Kripa Tamam Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam, Paramananda Madhavam, Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram, Hari Om Tat Sat. Canto 6, Chapter 1, the Yamadutas seize Ajamil. The vast assembly of ascetics slowly returned to the large clearing at Naimisharanya in small groups, discussing together as they walked. Suta's morning narration had ended on a harrowing note. Many had openly wept when hearing the descriptions of hell. As they took their places, Shaunak overheard snatches of their conversations. In the sinful age of Kali, everyone will suffer the horrors of hell. After this morning session, I better appreciate the urgency of our 1,000-year sacrifice. So do I. We must save these poor souls. Shaunak raised his arms to quieten the sages. Turning to Sutta, he said, "Everyone here feels duty bound to help others with body, mind, and words. Pray tell us, what can we do for the souls hurtling toward hell?" Sutta spoke reassuringly. "Gentle Shaunak, take heart." Parikshit also lamented upon hearing of the conditioned soul's torments. Desiring to benefit them, he intelligently questioned Shukadev. Listened to Shukadev's illuminating response. Tears ran down Parikshit's face. He glanced around the assembled sages. It was late at night and he could not make out their features in the dark. But he felt sure that they shared his feelings. In this bleak and sinful age of Kali, so many people would descend toward hell. There had to be a way of saving them. He thought over everything Shukadev had explained so far. Seeking an answer, after some moments he questioned the sage. "My lord, you have described the gradual path of liberation from the cycle of birth and death, which elevates one to the abode of Lord Brahma and then to the spiritual world." This is from chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And then to the spiritual world. You explained how, influenced by the modes of nature, living entities try to enjoy themselves in the material universe. Thus they accept various bodies, birth after birth, and sometimes attain heaven. Verses 3 to 5, you described the terrible sufferings resulting from sinful life. You also spoke of the first Manvantara, presided over by Swambhuva Manu. You then spoke of the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and Uttanpad. Then you described the material cosmos, the 3 planetary systems and their residents. Shukadev smiled, pleased with the king's recall. What else would you like to know? Verse 6, Parikshit folded his palms. O highly qualified sage, how can we save people from the pain of hell? Verses 7 to 8, Shukadev said, My dear Parikshit, as a king, you know people must perform atonement for their sins. This saves them from going to hell in the next life and deters them from committing further sins in this life. Therefore, just as a sick man voluntarily accepts painful treatments, people should similarly atone for their sins. Verse 9 and 10, Parikshit slowly shook his head. My lord, in my experience, atonement is ineffectual. Even if someone has seen the punishment meted out to the criminals, experience such punishment himself, or even if he knows from the scriptures that he will enter hell in his next life, still he cannot stop himself from re-offending. However, I think this repeated sinning and atoning is useless. I am reminded of an elephant which rolls in the dust immediately after bathing in the river. Verses 11 and 12, Shukadev smiled. He had only mentioned the atonement process to test his disciple. The king had passed the test, as Shukadev had felt sure he would. He said, "Well spoken, king. One type of materialistic work cannot negate another type. Acts of atonement and sinful acts are both born of the desire for material enjoyment. Ignorance of one's true self causes materialism. The only way to change is to cultivate knowledge of the soul. This is the path of Gyan, which is more effective and less painful than atonement by physical punishment. Following the regulative principles of knowledge gradually cures one of material desires. It is like following the principles of good nutrition to strengthen the immune system and protect one from infection. What are the principles by which one cultivates knowledge of the soul?" Verses 13 and 14. First, one must restrain the mind and senses from material enjoyment, starting with strict celibacy. One must be charitable, truthful, clean, and non-violent. He must also refrain from flesh, foods, and intoxicants. These are proscriptions. The main prescription to cultivate spiritual knowledge is to chant Krishna's holy names. Faithfully following these principles will temporarily purify one's tendency to commit sins. Temporarily, said Parikshit. Does that mean that it is possible to sin again despite following this process? Shukadev said, "Unfortunately, yes. Imagine that our sins are the dried leaves of a creeper. The path of knowledge is like a fire which burns those leaves but not the creeper's roots. In due course, it will grow again." Parikshit said, "Is it possible to become completely free of sins, including the possibility of again shining?" Verse 15, Shukadev's eyes widened. "Oh yes, pure devotional service to Krishna destroys even the roots of sin. As the sun dissipates fog, this is very rare. What is the difference between the path of knowledge and that of pure bhakti?" Shukadev said, "Pure devotees are attracted to serving Krishna. How does one become a pure devotee?" Verse 16, Shukadev said, "One must serve and receive training from one who has pure devotion to Krishna. You will thus learn how to dedicate your life to the Lord and become completely purified. Nothing else can do this, neither austerity, penance, celibacy, nor any other method of atonement." Parikshit glanced over at the sages, many of whom adhered to the path of Gyan. Turning back to Shukadev, he said, "Some say that bhakti is for less intelligent people who cannot endure the hard disciplines of Jnana and Ashtanga." Verses 17 and 18, Shukadev shook his head. "Pure devotees are friendly, virtuous, and surrendered to Krishna. The path they follow is the most auspicious for everyone. The Vedas fully authorize it, and there need be no fear of failure. As you cannot purify a liquor pot even after washing it many times, no other process, no matter how strictly followed, can purify conditioned souls." Parikshit nodded in understanding. Those contaminated with misconceptions about spiritual practice who did not accept bhakti were like pots contaminated by liquor. They could never be purified. Verse 19, the sage continued, "Those who seek refuge in Krishna and are attracted to hearing and chanting about him become freed of sinful reactions even if they have not yet seen the Lord. Even in dreams, they never see the Yamadutas who bind the sinful with ropes and drag them to the hell. Listen as I relate an ancient history of a conversation between them and Lord Vishnu's servants." Verse 21, Ajamil walked along the road leading to his city, his young bride by his side. "Welcome to Kanyakubj," he said with a sweep of his arm. She peered up at the high walls and buildings ahead. "This is a big town, much larger than my village. You will be happy here," he said. "Nearly everyone is Narayan's devotee." The girl smiled. She had served him all her life. Ajamil went on, "In your new home, we will worship Lord together. We have a most beautiful deity of him. Since my childhood, I have served him along with my parents." They strolled through the narrow lanes toward his house. His parents were waiting outside, eager to greet their new daughter-in-law. Ajamil and his young wife touched the elderly couple's feet. Ajamil's father said, "It is good you spend time with her parents. It will be hard for them to see her go. Come, come, you must be tired and hungry." He turned to go inside. His wife embraced her daughter-in-law. "Ah, Anala, you are even more beautiful than I remember from your wedding day. Ajamil, you are a lucky man to have such a wife." She led them to the shrine room. "First you must see the Lord." The months passed happily for the family. Ajamil maintained them by teaching. He and his young wife assisted his parents with their worship. Anala daily cooked the offerings for Narayan. Ajamil dressed and decorated him and performed his arati ceremonies. Together with his parents, they would sing hymns several times a day for Narayan's pleasure and sit together as a family to discuss the scriptures. On several mornings each week, Ajamil would go to the local woods to collect fragrant flowers for the daily worship. He loved the freshness of the morning air. He liked to sing songs glorifying Narayan and to hear the birds chirp in reply. One morning, however, as he entered the nearby woods, the usual peace was disturbed by the raucous laughter of a man and a woman. A man's intoxicated voice rang out in the still morning, "Come on, my lovely, you know you want me as much as I want you." Ajamil caught sight of a man and a woman coming along the path. Their clothes were disheveled and the woman's hair hung loose. They stopped beneath the tree to embrace and kiss. The man lustily fondled the woman, who giggled and made a show of resisting. Ajamil strenuously endeavored to check his mind and look away, yet he found his eyes repeatedly drawn to the lewd spectacle before him. When he peered around the bush, the woman spotted him. She laughingly pushed away the man who was trying to lay her on the ground. "Not here," she hissed. "Let's go back to my room in the tavern." The man objected, but she insisted. "Come, I have more wine in my room. We can have a better time there." The man laughed and put his arm around her waist. They stumbled past the bush where Ajamil hid. When they were a little way down the path, she glanced back and catching Ajamil's eye, she winked at him. Ajamil's heart leapt. It seemed she liked him. Burning with lusty desires, he watched open mouthed as the couple disappeared down the path. Slowly walking home, he thought of the woman. Where did she live? She had mentioned a tavern. He would seek her out in every inn in the town. Over the next few days, Ajamil was unrecognizable by his family. Whereas normally he had been kind, gentle, and respectful in his dealings, suddenly he was surly and gruff. He had always been attentive when discussing the scriptures, but now he was constantly distracted. He would go out all day telling no one where he was going. If they asked him what was wrong or commented on the change in him, he would become defensive and aggressive, to the point that they felt frightened to say anything to him. He scoured the town's taverns until he at last found the woman. After this, he visited her regularly. On some nights, she would be with other customers and he would have to leave disappointed. He could not bear those times, seeing her with others. When he wished that he alone could have her, one day he took his wife's gold ornaments and went to the tavern. Offering them to the prostitute, he begged her to come and live with him. "Your family would never allow that," she said. "You are a respectable Brahmin. How can they stop me? My parents are elderly and weak and my wife obeys me. Anyway, I shall tell them I've hired you as a maidservant." She looked away disinterested. "You will soon tire of me," Ajamil pleaded. "No, I will give you more gold. I will serve you. Just agree to be mine." She looked at the handsome young Brahmin and at the wealth he had placed before her. What did she have to lose? "All right then, I will come with you. It's got to be better than living in this dump." Ajamil took the woman back to his house, much to the dismay of his parents and young wife. From the first day, it was apparent that she was there only to serve Ajamil's lust. Anala was heartbroken. He would hardly look at her, deeply aggrieved to see their young daughter-in-law suffering. His parents' health deteriorated. Within the year, they passed away, and Ajamil's distraught wife returned to her father. Now, Ajamil spent his entire inheritance on indulging the prostitute's whims. Verse 22, as his funds ran low, he began scheming how to make more money. He turned his home into a gambling den. where he plundered unsuspecting men of their wealth in order to maintain the prostitute and the children. He became increasingly ruthless. He not only cheated at gambling but even stopped to robbing innocent passers-by. Verses 23 and 24. Many years passed, but Ajamil's passion for the prostitute did not abate in the least. He conceived 10 sons with her, the youngest of whom was born when Ajamil was 83. This boy Narayan was his parents' favorite. Verse 25. Dada, Dada, be horsey for Nara. The chubby little boy pulled on Ajamil's dhoti. Ajamil tousled his hair. Now you're 5 years old, Narayan. Dada will buy you a real pony. Little Narayan jumped up and down in joy. Will you, Dada? Will you? Ajamil laughed. Yes, Narayan, but first you and Dada are going to eat breakfast. Verse 26. Ajamil lifted his son onto his lap. He broke off a piece of chapati and wrapped it around some cooked vegetables, took a bite, and then offered to his son. Come on, Narayan, chew like daddy. He pointed to his mouth. Narayan, look how I chew. The boy pushed Ajamil's hand away. I'm thirsty. Ajamil laughed. He gave his son a cup of water. Here you are, Narayan, have a drink. Not long into breakfast, Ajamil had a severe coughing fit. How have you seen the doctor yet? Asked his wife. Nothing wrong with me that a little rest won't cure. He got up and led his son into his bedroom. Come on, Narayan, you play with your toys while daddy has a quick nap. Then we'll go buy that pony. After all, Narayan is 5 years old now, big enough to ride a real horse. Verse 27. Wearied by his coughing fits, Ajamil lay down on his cot. Narayan played with his toys nearby. As Ajamil watched him, his mind drifted back to Narayan's birth, and the first time he held him, there had been a special bond between them. Verse 28 and 29. As he lay gazing at his son, a dark cloud filled the room. A gruff voice growled, "He's here." Ajamil looked rapidly from side to side. Who was that? Suddenly he felt terrible pain seize his chest. Out of the darkness stepped 3 hideous-looking beings. Their deformed, stocky bodies were covered in hair. Fierce reddish eyes glared at Ajamil from twisted. Ajamil tried to get up, but they pushed him down. The pain became unbearable. From the corner of his eye, he spotted his son playing, oblivious to his danger. With his last ounce of strength, he called out, "Narayan." As he did so, he remembered Lord Narayan, whom he had served in his youth. Tears trickled down his face as the 3 fearsome beings began yanking him out of his body. These were surely the Yamadutas. Oh, what had come over him? Why had he been so foolish as to have forsaken his Lord's service? Verse 30 and 31. An effulgence slowly filled the room, pushing back the darkness. The Yamadutas, who were pulling Ajamil out of his body, looked around startled. Before them stood 4 brilliant armed beings, bedecked with jewels and garlanded with lotus flowers. In their hands they carried swords, clubs, chakras, and bows. "Release him," they ordered. Awed by the majesty of the newcomers, the Yamadutas did as they were told. Verses 32 and 33. Who are you? One asked. How dare you challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraj? Another said, Who is your master? Where do you come from? And why are you stopping us from taking this wretch? The third Yamaduta said, Are you gods, celestials, or pure devotees? So we'll continue from verses 34 onwards of chapter 1 of Canto 6 next time. Thank you for joining. Hare Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.